Hello. Can we start over?
So I think one of the most useful types of reviews that we can do when we have a vehicle for a week is to really put it through its paces by taking some kind of trip with it, using it over an extended period of time. And so Kia sent me this Sportage with, it's a fully loaded X Pro model, and we'll get into more of the features and stuff later, but it is Mrs. Jax and I's 20th anniversary this week. So in case you're wondering, yes, that's amazing, and also we're old. So we're taking this on our anniversary trip to one of our favorite places in the whole world, Disney World. Yes, we are going on our 20th anniversary trip to Disney World. We're gonna take this and we're gonna let you know how it is. Definitely not gonna have any trouble filling this thing's cargo space, which is one of the biggest in the class. So for a couple's trip to Disney, that's a good start.
So here we are in China.
Well, they can't see China.
Okay, but I'm
you're
in China.
looking at China.
That's China, and that's, I don't know, something
Behind
else.
you
Behind me
is Italy
is the
and
World
America.
Showcase. So again, really awesome place to be. We took the Kia Sportage on here. So when he said you've got a Kia Sportage, I was like, I mean, whatever, not super exciting. But then when I saw it in the driveway, Kia, 10 out of 10, guys, 10 out of 10. I really like the front end. I like the lights. What are they, like boomerang lights or something? They look really cool.
I would call them boomerangs.
You would call them boomerangs. It like looks like tough, but like sleek. So, which I love. I don't like I love a like tough looking car, but I think it combines tough with like,
futuristic.
not future, like.
We're in Epcot.
Like fancy. What's the better word for fancy that I'm looking for? Luxury.
Premium.
It's like premium.
There you go,
yes,
Kia.
Yes, I like it. And we have the like army green color. I don't know what that's called, but I'm really digging it. So again, 10 out of 10.
Oh, hello. So Mrs. Jax she already talked about the way the Kia Sport. Okay, I'll admit, in pictures don't do it justice. I thought it was weird looking in pictures, but in real life, I appreciate the way it looks a lot more. And I also appreciate the fact that Kia is trying to sort of differentiate the way that some of the models look. The Sportage looks like a Kia, but it doesn't necessarily look like the Telluride. Like the Seltos and the Sportage and the Telluride, each uniquely Kia, but also each uniquely themselves. I'm gonna go back to enjoying the view.
How about you think about buying me a Telluride?
No.
Kia Sportage?
More realistic.
Okay.
We both liked the way that the Sportage looked. In fact, I think this green and black combo is pretty fantastic. But to be honest with you, I think the Sportage looks good in pretty much any trim. It's a daring design that I think works in this case.
So we're in Disney World. We came down for our 20th anniversary trip. 20 years with that guy. I deserve a trip. Disney's our favorite place, so we drove the Kia Sportage, which I wasn't sure one way or the other how I was going to feel about it. I really, really liked it. The seats were probably my favorite part. I'm very particular on, especially on a long car ride, because it was about like 100 hours because there was terrible traffic. But I'm very particular on if the seats are comfortable and if I can ride the whole time and my butt not hurt, and that was totally happened. They were super comfortable, heated, cooled, lovely.
Yes, the interior is fantastic, as maybe you'd expect by now when it comes to Hyundai and Kia products. In typical Kia fashion, this thing is basically loaded to the gills for 38.6. You get the really attractive dual 12.3-inch digital gauge cluster and infotainment screen. That, of course, comes with CarPlay, which is wired in this case, but that's not that big of a deal. You get heated and cooled seats, a heated steering wheel, memory seats, a pano sunroof, and an excellent surround view camera that can be accessed via a convenient button. Are you listening, other automakers? How is it that the fake wood trim in the Kia Sportage feels more convincing than that in the $75,000 Jeep Grand Cherokee plug-in hybrid? Because it does.
Hi, we're at Epcot today, and if you can see the World Showcase behind me and all this stuff, it's been a good time. I'm a big fan of interiors, and I like it. I'm a teacher, so I can't have fancy cars, so I like it when there's like fancy interiors on a maybe not so fancy car, and I feel like the Kia Sportage really came through with that. My favorite is this thing. What is that? The dash? Is that what you call it?
Gauge cluster.
The gauge cluster. I knew that. That's like all one big screen that goes all the way across. I just think it's like really like sleek and cool looking, and it makes the Kia Sportage like look like a fancy car, and I loved it. So another thing I really like about the Kia Sportage is how roomy it is. So I know I said earlier that I love the seats. They're super comfortable. My butt didn't hurt. 10 out of 10. But look, I'm 5'9", and I can fit in here with like my legs like totally stretched out, so I can like, you know, take a nap while he's driving, which is 10 out of 10.
That's what you always do.
Well, someone's got to take a nap. And then in the back, well, he's got his big old camera bag back here, but I can still fit like with my legs like this. Like I could take a nap back here and I could take a nap up there at the same time.
So you're gonna take a nap at the same time?
Yeah. And I'm 5'9", so.
This review is very scientific.
I'm just saying, there's tons of space. So for what looks like a fairly little car, good job, Kia.
One thing I will ding the Sportage for is that the back has a ton of space, but our gigantic suitcase, which is necessary because Mrs. Jax likes to carry a gigantic suitcase, 1% for me, 99% for her, it can't stand up in here and it has to lay flat, and I can't do it long ways because the sloping roof line prevents the hatch from closing. So there is a ton of space, but you're a little bit limited by the cool exterior styling of the Sportage.
I'm about to leave you here and then I'll have a whole lot more space in there.
This is valuable consumer information for people that carry ginormous suitcases.
Fashion is fashion.
At Disney?
Oh, actual numbers? Well, this thing has nearly 40 cubic feet of cargo space behind the second row, which is basically best in class. Also, as you can see, it has enough rear seat room for Mrs. Jax to easily sit behind herself, comfortably sit behind herself, which is great because we have tall children. And it even has enough second row space for me to sit behind me, all 6'6" of me, which in a vehicle of this size is very impressive.
My favorite part of the Sportage on the way down was the adaptive cruise control. Because the Sportage is one of the newest models from Kia, it has their most updated adaptive cruise system, and it is really, really good. You're able to take your hands off the wheel for quite some time, and it only prompts you to put your hands back on the wheel if it gets into a very curvy situation. So I really appreciated that in the terrible, awful traffic that we hit on the way down from Atlanta.
Powering the Sportage is a 2.5-liter four-cylinder, making 187 horsepower and 178 pound-feet of torque. You can, of course, get the Kia Sportage in plug-in hybrid trim, which has 261 combined horsepower and 34 miles of EV range. But you can't get it in the X Pro trim, and it'll cost you another $6,000. Well, to get it comparably equipped compared to this one. That's a shame since the base engine feels pretty dull. It verges on feeling underpowered, and it only gets decent fuel economy. And ultimately, it doesn't really do this small SUV justice, especially since it rides and handles pretty well.
On the way down, the Kia Sportage's ride on the highway was excellent. I will admit that in more challenging conditions on some of the back roads we had to take, because traffic was just awful, on some of those back roads, the suspension is maybe just a little bit too soft for me. This is not a Mazda CX-5 after all, but if comfort is your priority, and I think for most people it is with this type of vehicle, then it is incredibly comfortable. I mean, we were in the car for a very long time. Atlanta to Orlando is not a short trip, and it was utterly smooth on the interstate. So definitely something that the Kia Sportage gets right.
10 out of 10.
10 out of 10.
Well, it's very soft, actually, okay? And it doesn't have a lot of head toss. Now, what is head toss? Head toss is when you go over kind of a rocking motion and you get that bobblehead effect. Like right here on the handling road, we're going over half of the road is terrible pavement, half of the road is fine. And the Sportage doesn't have head toss, but it is very soft. You get a lot of up and down motion in the Sportage. Now, some people like that style of ride, and if you're one of those people, you will find the Sportage incredibly comfortable. But if you're not one of those type of people, you're gonna find this thing to be very bouncy over certain types of road imperfections. For example, on the highway down to Orlando, expansion joints on bridges or going up to bridges or on elevated highways, this thing would like wallow up and down. And again, not unpleasant, but it definitely doesn't feel as buttoned down as a CX-5 or a Honda CR-V. Now, another thing that I noticed on a long trip, and we were in this thing for many, many hours because the traffic to Orlando was horrifically bad. So Google Maps rerouted us onto some back roads, which necessitates every once in a while a passing maneuver when someone is going incredibly slow. This thing is not super great at passing because the powertrain is pretty anemic. And the transmission is great in day-to-day driving, but to make the most of a sort of anemic engine, you would want the transmission to kick down a little faster and more aggressively. It's almost like Kia needs to be more aware. It's like, look, we know we didn't put the most exciting engine in this version, so we'll make up for it by the transmission being a little more responsive. And you'd like to see a little bit more of a miles per gallon payoff when the powertrain is on the less powerful side. And we were touching about 30 miles per gallon over incredibly long stretches of highway driving. I'm talking about 9 or 10 hours one way to Orlando. And hey, my Atlanta friends, you know that's excessive, like very excessive. And around town, it's more like 25. So, you know, it doesn't really come with a MPG benefit. But I can confirm, because of the absolutely obnoxious amount of time that Mrs. Jax and I spent in this thing, that it is incredibly comfortable over long trips. I definitely kind of carp on seats that don't do a great job with lumbar support. And these seats, I never really had any issues, never felt any pressure points. I almost was about to say that I thought the butt cushion was a little too firm, but you know what? I think I'm wrong and Kia is right, because I was in this thing for 10 hours going down and 9 hours coming back, and I didn't really have any aches or pains, despite being a little bit under the weather coming back, as you can tell. So if you have a tall family like mine, and you're interested in taking something like the Sportage on a longer trip to something like Disney, where you don't need to pack a bunch of stuff because you're always doing things and going to the parks, the Sportage can handle it. I don't think you'd be disappointed in the comfort and amenities that this thing has over such a extended period of time, especially when you start to get very irritated by that extended period of time.
Now, if you've seen some of the B-roll, you might notice that this Kia Sportage is the fully loaded X Pro model, which is why it's riding on these sort of off-roady biased tires and the smaller wheels. Now, that's sort of weird because you think a smaller SUV is not something you really take on hardcore off-roading. However, this thing can lock the center differential. I don't think it uses I think it uses an electronic locker, not like a mechanical locker.
Okay, so it actually does have a center locking diff. At least it's an electro-hydraulic center coupling that can be locked. And all-wheel drive models come with an extra 1.5 inches of ground clearance. So there's that too. Oddly though, the drive modes don't specify more rugged off-road modes, which I think is a little weird since this thing seems to be rather capable. We didn't test that, obviously, but I will say that these sort of knobby BF Goodrich off-road biased tires were perfectly pleasant on long highway trips.
But that's why this thing looks so capable. It also just looks cooler than the normal Sportage in general. Also, I'm a big fan of this color paint with the black accents.
Me too.
So should you buy a Kia Sportage? Well, absolutely. It's incredibly competitive, especially when weighed against the class leaders. It's loaded with tech and options at a reasonable price, drives relatively well, and it's incredibly spacious. If you want more dynamics than what the Sportage offers, then give up some of the space and get yourself a Mazda CX-5. But the Sportage really does make a case for itself against the leaders Honda CR-V and Toyota RAV4, and it's much more attractive than the incredibly ugly Hyundai Tucson. I apologize for my voice sounding a bit under the weather, but that's what happens when you spend a week at Disney. All my Disney fans out there, you know what I mean. So I hope you found this useful. Share it with anybody who might, and if you're so inclined, please like, subscribe, and stick around for more reviews. I'm gonna leave you with some pictures from our Disney trip, all right? I'll see you in the next review. Peace. This exposes what a dork I am when it comes to Disney World, because I am.
Oh yeah, well, that's how it's been.
Do people know what those words mean?
Yeah, and then come around here.
I'm still filming?
Yeah.
I couldn't really see those dope tires when you were filming.
Did you stop the recording?
But
No,
your
when I
head's-
start talking.
Oh, your head's so big. You want me to I don't have to see your head?
Then you
I'm so inadequate that I have to give my truck a crappy exhaust.